In this video on guitar warm-up exercises, I'm going to show you the best warm-up routines for guitar. How do you know what's the best way you should be warming up for guitar? I'll tell you later in this video. Hi, I'm Tom Hess, and today we'll go through some guitar warm-up exercises in this step-by-step tutorial, and we'll talk about daily guitar warm-ups and what you need to do before you start practicing your guitar. Years ago, whenever I would start warming up before a guitar practice session, I just went through mindless chromatic scales and silly finger exercises because if you did them long enough, they did tend to warm up the fingers, but I never felt like I was getting anywhere, and all that time spent doing the warm-up routine just seemed like a big waste of time. And actually, it was a big waste of time. The best guitar warm-up exercises should always advance your guitar playing. So if they don't make you a better guitar player, you're mostly wasting precious time. How do you do that? I'm going to show you in this video in just a few minutes. I've taught this stuff to thousands of students online from around the world. Here's a preview of what we'll cover in this guitar warm-up tutorial. Number one, I'll show you the real purpose of warming up before you practice guitar. Here's a hint. It's not just about warming up your hands. Number two, I show you the common warm-up mistakes to avoid that most people make. I used to make all these same mistakes too. Next, I'll lay out the best ways to warm up with specific tips you can use right away in your daily warm-up routine. I show you 6 of my best warm-up exercises for guitar. Then I'll play through each warm-up example for you. This lesson on guitar warm-ups will give you a great workout to propel your guitar playing skills forward. You know, people often ask me, what are the best warm-up exercises for guitar? Well, I think that the best exercises for warming up have 5 characteristics. I've broken these 5 things down for you into little tips. Here they are. Now, this first tip might seem really obvious to you, but in combination with the other tips that follow, it may not be something you've thought about before, or at least not quite in this way. So here it is, tip number 1. Each warm-up routine should warm up all of your fretting hand fingers and your picking hand. Yes, I told you it was going to be really obvious, but stick with me, it gets much more interesting from here. Warm-up tip number 2. Use warm-up exercises that are based on real-life, actual guitar playing, not mindless finger exercises. So instead of doing this and think that you're warming up, I mean, you are, but it's mindless, it's kind of pointless. Instead of doing that, play something, anything that you might actually use in real life. A scale, a sequence, an arpeggio, a lick, something real. Just make sure that you play it slowly during your warm-up. Warm-up tip number 3. All warm-up routines should make you a better guitar player when you do them. So warm up with something you need to learn, practice, and master anyway, but that you typically don't practice, maybe because it's hard or maybe because it's just boring. For example, you might be struggling with memorizing where the notes are on the guitar. You probably can figure out where the notes are, but if I ask you to immediately and instantly find the B flat on the G string, you might hesitate for a little moment before you can find it and play it immediately. That's an example of finding those notes, playing them real quick, moving around the neck. You probably don't spend a lot of time doing that, but it's an example of something you need to do anyway. It'll help you massively. It will make you a better guitar player, and you're doing a little bit of playing. Here's another example. Let's say that you already know the pentatonic scales, and you know your major scales and minor scales. Let's make that assumption for the moment. And now you want to learn and memorize the melodic minor scales, or some other set of scales or modes. You might be able to figure them out. You might be able to play them slowly if you kind of recall where the notes are, but you're not yet able to play them fluidly and fluently in a real context. If you and I were sitting down together and we were improvising, I'm playing chords for you and you're going to play the solo, if you would be having a hard time working your way up down the guitar neck in melodic minor modes or whatever scale it is that you're wanting to work with, that's a good indication that going through that, playing those scales, either straight up and down or in some type of sequence, would be a great thing for you to add to your warm-up routine. You want to learn that stuff anyway. You should learn it anyway. It's going to make you a better guitar player, but you might find it kind of boring or tedious or just not that much fun. That's a great thing to put into your warm-up routine. Another example might be to do something like a sequence of sixths, let's say, in position. So real quickly, what is a sequence of six? Well, if you have a scale, let's take this major scale here. A sequence of six would be where you play the first note of the scale, then you play the sixth note of that scale, then you play the second note, then you go up a sixth from here, then you play the third note, then you play the sixth from here, then you play the next note of the scale, then you play the sixth from here. You get the idea. That's a sequence of sixths in position. That's a great little thing you can add into your daily warm-up. It makes you a better guitar player. It helps you memorize the scales better. Helps you really ingrain the position of where the notes are. It makes you think about the intervals of the sixths. It's really good for your picking because there's some string skipping involved. It's just an example. If that example is too advanced for you right now, that's okay. You can pick something more simple. But the point is it's something you would use in real life, or you certainly could. It's something that makes you better, helps you memorize your modes or your scales better. It does a lot of things for you, so it belongs in your warm-up. This doesn't belong in your warm-up. It's mindless. It doesn't make you any better. Guitar warm-up tip number 4. Warm-up exercises that force you to concentrate in order to play them correctly are awesome. So what we don't want to do when we're warming up, we don't want our brain to go to sleep. We don't want it to go on autopilot where you can play, but you don't have to do any thinking. That's part of the problem with stuff like this. You don't have to think about that because you've probably done it a million times. It's very simple, it's very easy, and your mind tends to go on autopilot. Your hands go on autopilot. Your mind basically goes to sleep or starts thinking about something else. That's not what we want to have happen. During your warm-up routines, you want your brain to be engaged in concentrating the entire time because that brain engagement is what makes you a better guitar player, okay? Doing things on autopilot doesn't make you any better, not really. When your brain is concentrating, that's when you're growing, that's when you're advancing, that's when you're getting better. So let me give you a quick example of this. Let's take a sequence, let's say a sequence of thirds, like this. Now, if that is a sequence that is unfamiliar to you or you can't play it fluidly, that might be something that you would add into your warm-up routine. If that is easy for you, if you already know how to do that and you can do it without thinking and it's pretty simple, then what you can do is you can take each of those pair of notes, for example, that's a pair, and then that's a pair, that's a pair. You can take each of those pairs and play them backwards. That's called sequence of thirds in reverse. You can also alternate between playing the pair of notes forward and reverse. For example, so that pair of notes was played forward. The next pair of notes, which would be this, those are played in reverse order. So instead of going from A to C, I'm going to go from C to A. So here's what it would sound like. Then the next pair of notes would be forward. The next pair would be in reverse. So it sounds like this. Okay, so that sequence is pretty easy for me because I've practiced it many, many times. But if we find a sequence that challenges you, or you really have to think about, that's what we're after. So don't worry about the example I just played for you. That's not important. I'll give you other examples later. What I want you to focus on is the concept. And the concept is if you're able to play something and your brain doesn't have to think about it, it's not any good for a really good warm-up, okay? We want to find things where you have to struggle mentally. You have to concentrate in order to play the right notes correctly. That is what we want to do for a warm-up. So our warm-up routines are not simply just to warm up our hands, it's to help us become better. And if our brain is turned off because our hands on autopilot, we're not getting any better. We're just going through the motions. When the brain is turned on, you are getting better. Guitar warm-up tip number 5. Look for warm-up exercises that integrate 2 or more skills together. So for example, if you want to learn or master an unfamiliar scale, a scale that might be new to you or you kind of know it, but you still have to think about it when you're improvising, you can't play it totally fluently from any finger or from any string. You might want to integrate that also with some sort of sequence, some sort of scale sequence, or you might want to double pick each note. That will actually help you with your two-hand synchronization at the same time that you're trying to learn and master the scale. Another thing that you might consider is taking that scale and going through all the modes or positions up and down the guitar neck. Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, if this is a little bit more advanced for where you're at, don't worry about it. You'll get there. You can come back to this another time. But if this is something that you understand, then you know that going through the positions this way really helps you to sort of see how the scale patterns connect. I'm often asked this question: how long should I warm up before practicing guitar? Well, my answer is as long as it takes for your fingers to feel ready to play fluently at your faster speeds. So that means in winter months when it's cold outside, it's going to take longer for you to warm up than it will when it's summertime. You can speed up the process of warming up your fingers by soaking your hands in very, very warm water. That will help your hands and arms literally warm up much faster. But be careful. Don't get the fingertips of your fretting hand wet because that will make your calluses very soft. And you don't want to practice with your calluses soft because everything is going to feel very differently than how it normally feels to play guitar when the calluses are dry and they're harder. All right? So you don't want to get these fingertips wet. Let's take a look now at an actual example. This one is very simple. It's just a C major scale. It's laid out 3 notes per string. Now, when you're warming up, don't play it fast like I sort of did there a little bit. Play it slow, play it nice and easy, and pay attention to the picking motions. So what you'll see here is I've written out the picking motions for you, and this is using directional picking. This is not alternate picking here. So if this is new to you, then this would be a great time to learn this directional picking technique if you're used to doing alternate picking for scales. You can do it during your warm-up because your brain is going to be engaged. It's going to have to think, if this is new, it's something you would really play in real life. I mean, you play scales all the time in songs and solos, etc. So it's really good for stuff like that. Now let's take a look at example number 2. As you'll see, it's the same scale written out again. The only difference is now we are double picking each note. Why would we do this? Well, one, it sounds different and can sound cool, especially when you use palm muting, to double pick licks or notes or scales or whatever. It has a cool sound. Number 2, it's really good to help develop your two-hand synchronization because for every one note that you play in the left hand, you're picking 2 notes in the right hand. So there's twice as much activity going on in the picking hand as there is in the fretting hand. So on. So you go up and down the neck just like that. It's a great exercise. You can take this with any scale, any mode. You can do it with anything actually. Any lick that you know, any piece of a solo. Double picking during warm-up is a great way to work on synchronization. It also forces your fretting hand not to play very fast, right? Because you're only playing half as fast as you're picking. So that forces you not to get carried away and start playing faster than you should while you're still trying to warm up. Let's take a look at example number 3. This is even easier than examples 1 and 2. All we have here is a very simple A minor pentatonic scale. If that scale is unfamiliar to you, then this is exactly what you should be doing. If the scale is familiar to you and you've played this for years and this is very simple and you can do it in your sleep and you don't have to think about it and it's totally easy and you could rip through it even when you're not warmed up, think about what you can do with this scale in a warm-up routine where you would have to concentrate, where you would have to slow down, where you have to think about it. And all of a sudden, you have a great workout routine. We'll come back to this in just a couple examples ahead. We'll come back to the scale and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So in example 4, we've got this Hirajoshi pentatonic scale. Very cool sound, very exotic sounding, a little bit oriental sounding. This sounds great over an E minor chord or a C chord or in the key of G or the key V minor. Sounds fantastic over C Lydian, of course. But anyway, the point is, it's a scale that you might not be familiar with. It's something that would force you to concentrate and think about if it is unfamiliar. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with this little scale, a lot of very cool phrases and licks that you can do. So being familiar with this scale will help you. It's a great warm-up to get started. Let's move on to example number 5. We're going to go back to the A minor pentatonic scale. All right, now if you can already do that, if that's already familiar and it's not really hard or anything, then the next step would be to make a sequence out of it. So the sequence that I've written for you is very simple. It's very, very common. You may know this already. You may be able to do this with, without really much thinking at all. Here's what it sounds like. And a little bit faster, it sounds like this. You hear it all the time in solos, blues, classic rock, blues rock. It's a really cool sequence. So there are things that you can do with this that if this is not familiar to you, you can take this sequence, you could play it through all the pentatonic scales that you know, and it would be a great warm-up. If it is familiar to you, then one of the things you can do is you could double pick all of those notes, etc. You could triple pick the notes. You could do a whole host of things based on this sequence without really having to change it that much, which would make it challenging, be a great warm-up, work on your two-hand synchronization, and keeps your brain engaged. It makes for a fantastic warm-up. So example 6 is very similar to example 5. It's the same idea. We're just using a different scale. So we're back to this Hirajoshi scale. And we're just descending the scale using a sequence of 3s. Very, very cool sound. And again, if this is familiar to you, you can double pick it. You can do a sequence of 4 off of this. There's all kinds of things you can do using this as a seed or as a basis for your warm-up. Now let's talk about how to practice these warm-up ideas so that when you are trying to warm up on the guitar, it gets better and it's effective and it actually makes you a better player. So the first thing, play slowly. Don't play through this stuff fast. Remember, we're trying to avoid injury. We're trying to get your hands warmed up. So keep it slow. Second, everything we do, we want to make sure that our brain is engaged at all times during the warm-up exercises. If you go on autopilot, you might be warming up your hands, but you're not becoming a better guitar player. It's impossible. You only get better when your brain has to think. That's what makes you better. Next, push yourself mentally when warming up on the guitar. It's one thing to be doing some thinking. It's another thing to really push yourself. If it feels hard, that's good. That means you really are concentrating, you're putting in a lot of effort, and your brain is developing musically. That's exactly what you want to be doing in your warm-up. It's no mindless stuff. Next, integrate 2 or more ideas or 2 or more skills in anything that you're using to warm up. Next, make sure that whatever you do not only warms you up, but also makes you better, and it's something you would really do or really play in real life. Which of these tips are you going to try first? Let me know by leaving a comment below. If you like this video, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Do you know what the silent killer of your guitar technique is? It's excessive muscle tension. Excess tension creates a guitar speed barrier that you cannot break through until and unless you get rid of that tension. I'll show you how in my new free guide called Tension, the Silent Killer of Guitar Technique. It's totally free. Just click on the link below and download your copy right now. You'll be glad that you did.